Welcome back to a brand new day in the studio. In today's video, we're going to go in and put in the first color pass for the rest of the painting. So I'm going to keep my color study very close to me so that I can adhere to the large value and color relationships that were established in that study. So for my medium today, I'm just going to be using Liquin Original. My preferred medium is Gamblin's Neo McGilt, but I kind of ran out of it, so I'm going to be using this medium for a while. And in this little jar here, I have just my brush cleaner, which is, what's it called? Citrus Essence. It's supposed to be like a non-toxic, I'm sure it is, a non-toxic thinner, but the only reason I use it really is just because it has this property that at least I noticed that allows it to dry faster. I'm going to add just a tiny bit of medium to the brush. And so my color palette today consists of titanium white, flake white, burnt umber, alizarin permanent, cadmium, red medium, yellow ochre, sap green, ultramarine blue, and ivory black. And these are actually the colors that were on my palette. Yesterday what I did was I just kind of took them off the palette and put them on some glass in a freezer, except for the burnt umber. I swapped out the burnt umber for some a new pile of paint, just because burnt umber just dries extremely fast for me. So I'm going to leave the hair and the face alone for now, for this part of the video. And let's recall that the background color is kind of a greenish, now not the background color that you're observing in the photo reference. You know, we almost don't even need the photo reference for today. Remember in the color study, we came up with a color for the background to complement the hair. So the color for the background in the color study that we established was kind of a greenish, like a neutral greenish color. So let's see if this color will work. And again, I'm going to be looking back and forth at my photo reference and my color study. So I'm going to insert an image of the color study here. So remember that the color study is not about trying to color match the colors in the photo reference. It's really about trying to get the large colors to work in relations to one another. So I think with a combination of burnt umber, sap green, and I don't know, I guess burnt umber, sap green, and a little bit of titanium white, I think this is about the color I want. Perhaps it's a little too warm. So let's go in with a little more, whoops, see, that was a mistake. So I wanted to warm it up a little bit. Let's throw in some flake white. Once I get the color that I want for the background, I'm just going to go ahead and fill that color in. I'm not going to show you the entire process of me painting the background. It's just not really that important. I'm just trying to get, what's important is to get the color that we want. So let's see. Okay, about that. That's about the color that I want. So now what we're going to do is put in the rest of the background. So we're going to introduce a little bit of a darker value on the right side, the lower right side of the background, and a little bit lighter on the upper left side of the background. So again, we're just using our kind of our grayish dark green tone for the background with a little more ivory black as we approach the lower right hand corner. So now we're mixing up a kind of greenish, grayish green with the sap green, ultramarine blue and with the titanium white. Now we're going to put the lighter region of the gradient. And this is the gradient that we were talking about in the color study. So now with a little bit of Liquin, we're going to be thinning out the paint. So with a little tiny bit of Alizarin permanent with the ultramarine blue and ivory black, we're going to be sneaking in a little bit of warmth into the cast shadow for the shadow that's going to be casted from the chair. So now we're going to go and put that dark shape in. Remember, we put in a tiny bit of Alizarin permanent just to sneak in a little bit of warmth to contrast with the background. Now that we have the background in there, I think the next thing we're going to do is mix up the color that we're going to want to use for the sweater. So for the sweater, remember, I'm not trying to copy at all the color of the actual sweater, so I'm not trying to color match with the sweater. And remember, this is what we did in the color study for the sweater. So if you missed the video for the color study, I would definitely suggest that. So this is kind of probably too light, so I'm going to put a little more burnt umber, and I think that's going to be close. So let's see. That's actually pretty good. I mean, it's a little more red than I would want, so I'm going to go ahead and use some ivory black just to bring down the saturation and the value. That's much better. Just like we figured out in the value study and the color study for this painting. We want the sweater to be a little bit lighter in value than the background, but not that much. So we're making it a little different than the photo reference. And that's just for the sake of aesthetic, our own aesthetic. So I'm just going to go ahead and cover this. So using that same color, we're just going to dilute the paint with a little bit of Liquin. And now we're just going to go ahead and apply the paint very quickly onto the mass for the elbow. Just very carefully, just kind of putting a light application of paint. We're going to spread the paint even down towards here. Now we're going to mix up a little bit of ivory black and a little bit of alizarin permanent, and we're going to go ahead and put in some little dark shapes underneath of the elbow. So I don't want to render too much for the elbow or for basically any of the forms for the sweater. The only thing I really want are the most important elements, which are the light and the dark, and a few of the little halftones in between, but not that much. With a tiny bit of Liquin combined with our ivory black, burnt umber, and alizarin permanent, we're going to go ahead and put in this little cast shadow underneath the arm. So very lightly and very thin. So again, we just thinned it out with the Liquin. So now we're going to go ahead and mix up a lighter color. So a lighter value within the same color family of the color that we put onto the shirt. And I think that's about good. So I'm just going to apply some lighter regions for the shoulders and for the planes on the elbows that are facing the light the most. Now switching brushes, we're going to add a little bit more Liquin to this brush. This is a completely different brush now. So we're going to try to put in some of these little darker shapes. These are the little halftones that I was talking about earlier, and we're just going to apply a very light touch. This is very much kind of like an alla prima type of way to apply value transitions by painting wet directly on top of wet. Again, if you don't know what alla prima means, it just means basically painting wet on wet as opposed to layering. So right now we're just kind of using a type of alla prima approach for the halftones on the sweater. So now that we have all of this stuff covered, I think what's left now is the chair, and just like I did in the underpainting, I'm probably just going to just apply a thin glaze for that. But let's stand back for a second. So here we are about, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 feet away from the painting, and this is really what we want to, this is the part that we really want to strengthen, the way that the painting looks at a distance, especially now that we're in the larger color stage. So not this close or this close, but way back here. This is the distance that really matters. This is going to be the distance that people are going to see the painting at first glance. So after standing back, I'm noticing that the color for the chair is actually not bothering me that much, but I should at least put some kind of a color onto it. So let's go ahead and get a different brush. So I don't know, let's get this one, add a little bit of Liquin to it. Returning back to the angle with the palette, we're running out of space. I guess we'll mix over here. So titanium white. Let's see, what did I do last time? Last time in the color study, I mixed up a color very similar to the flesh color, but just a little bit cooler. So let's start off with something cooler first. Then we'll put in the yellow and the red. So now this is basically like a flesh tone. Now a little bit of ultramarine blue. Let's get some of that color into the mix, why not? Very, very gray. So now it's very gray. So let's add a little bit of alizarin permanent, but just a tiny bit. Now let's see how this color looks. And that's probably about where I want it to be honest. It's a little bit lighter than I had before, but I think luck is on my side. This is definitely the color that I want. And just to be sure that we don't have something that's too bright, let's go back to the palette. So again, here's the color that we had. So let's go ahead and get the palette knife and just compare what white looks like right next to that value. And see that's not even like completely white because I accidentally put it on top of the paint. But see how much further we have to go on or how much further we can go on the value scale. After rewatching that last clip, I kind of realized that the value that we're putting onto the chair mimics the value on my palette very closely. So if it looked like I wasn't mixing any paint at all, I assure you that I was. It's just that the value is super close to the value of the gray palette. So now the next thing that I'm doing is with a little more of the ivory black and a smidgen, a tiny bit of ultramarine blue, I'm starting to put in some of these darker shapes surrounding this one section of the chair. Now I'm not going to show you the development of the entire chair because it would be kind of redundant to show the same kind of thing being done. It would just be a little bit too tedious to show all of that. So right now I'm just putting in a little bit of ultramarine blue and a tiny bit of ivory black, leaning closer to the ultramarine blue with a touch of alizarin permanent. We're trying to get kind of a purplish tone for the shadow. And again, it's not because I'm seeing too much purple in the shadow for the chair. So a little thing about objects that are the color white, they tend to take on the colors of the surrounding areas. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of just editing the hue of this shadow a little bit by tinting it closer to the purplish side. See how we're kind of glazing on the shadow there onto the side. And I think that this is just going to help add a little bit of color, variety to the shadow of the chair. I didn't really mix this portion on the color study, but what we're doing is we're just taking, again, the ivory black, the titanium white, and the basically just alizarin permanent ultramarine blue. So we're just trying to get a kind of purple like mixture. It's kind of a grayed down purple, and I don't want anything too bright. Certainly not like certainly not a very chromatic purple. And now I'm just getting the same brush that I used to paint in the light for the chair, and I'm starting to go over that purple. And again, this is just to lighten the value of the cast shadow. And this is because I feel like the photo reference is making that shadow on the chair a little bit too sharp to be believable. I think it kind of overly compressed the edge quality, and I think in nature this shadow wouldn't have such a sharp edge. So now let's just go ahead and continue to soften these little shapes. And I think this is also kind of just up to the artist's own taste. It's really up to a matter of taste, and I just prefer this area to have a much softer cast shadow than what we're seeing in the photo reference. Now we're going to go ahead and just sharpen some edges just to contrast a little bit. So we're just putting in a much sharper edge here for one of these little, I don't know what you would call them, arm legs or something for the armrest of the chair. And again, we're sneaking in a little bit of purple into the shadow, a little bit of gray purple. And let's just go ahead and make this little cast shadow a little more elaborate. And so again, it's the same exact colors that I had for the chair, nothing more complicated. I don't want to put in a million colors in there for the chair. It's just not the look that I'm going after. And then the cast shadow underneath of the armrest, we're just sharpening that value a little bit. And now we're going to soften it as the shadow starts to rest onto the white region of the chair that's facing the light more. So I think it looks nice when you kind of apply a very thin edge to a shadow once in a while. So I think that that's about good for at least this portion of the chair. Now remember, I have the palette taped onto here, so I'm gonna have to figure out what to do from here. I know I need to paint the rest of the stuff that I covered, so tell you what, I have an idea. Alright, so here's my idea. Now, do you remember, those of you that have been watching these videos since the early days, do you remember that palette that I used to use? It's kind of dusty now, but this is something I've always wanted to do ever since I started making these videos, is try to figure out how to hold my palette, because, well, when I paint off camera, I hold my palette. I like to hold my palette and see the mixtures right next to the painting. So I'm gonna do my best to figure out the camera angles, but honestly, I'm really just trying to evolve. I'm not trying to do the same thing all the time. I'm trying to grow as an artist and a video maker, and an artist, painter, video maker. So yep, this is going to be an element of the rest of this part of the painting at least, and maybe more. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the paint off of this palette with a palette knife and place it. We're going to place it onto the palette. So here we have the colors on the palette, and honestly I'm really excited to actually get to hold my palette and paint and film. And I'm sorry for those of you that really like to have the palette right next to the painting. It's not like that's gonna go away. That's certainly going to continue. But I really want to hold a palette. I don't know, I love holding palettes. Do you? Let me know. Question of the day. Let's insert a question of the day. Do you enjoy holding your palette? I just noticed that I think I forgot my... Is this ivory black? Yeah, I forgot my ultramarine blue. I'll put it in afterwards. But anyway, question of the day. Do you enjoy holding your palette? Alright, so for the background color, again, it was just kind of a greenish burnt umber, sap green, titanium white. Something about like this. This is really one of the only instances that I would ever want to kind of like color match something. That's close enough. So I'm going to go ahead and cover the rest of this. So we're going to throw in a little bit more of the ivory black. Now I know what I did. I accidentally put the ivory black right next to the ultramarine blue. But I'll fix that before I film the next part, which will be tomorrow's video. So the ultramarine blue is right there. Just take a tiny bit of the ultramarine blue. Now filming wise, holding the palette will obviously create some complications, but I don't know, man. I just feel like it looks better. So I'm gonna push this little area darker. And again, I've really been wanting to make videos of myself painting and holding the palette. I just feel like it has much more of a classic touch. I'll do the best that I can with the filming so you can see the mixing, the color mixing. But don't worry, the palette that I put on the side is not going to be gone forever. Trust me, it won't be. Let's take a little bit of the ultramarine blue that we accidentally put right behind the ivory black, and a little bit of alizarin permanent. Tiny little bit of alizarin permanent there. Let's take some of this color just to kind of neutralize it. We're going to put that value right in here. Gotta hold the brush very still. Just something I can't really do too well. So another little trick I have whenever I can't keep my hands straight is I use something that's called a maul stick. So again, just the same purple, and it's going to help to hold my hand straight. So rather than leaning my hand on the wet painting, I'm leaning my hand on this maul stick to try to get a much cleaner line. And so I'm going to leave you with this view of the painting at least 8 or 10 feet away. And remember, that's really the distance that we want the painting to read its best. And in tomorrow's video, we're going to go right back into the portrait. I know, like I said earlier, the hair, I didn't touch the hair, so the hair, we'll bring that back, don't worry. So in tomorrow's video, we'll adjust some of the drawing things that we needed to adjust on the portrait, and then further solidify the flesh tones with a little bit more complexity. So I really hope that this video helps you out. I wish you the best in all of your artwork, and as always, I'm really trying to bring you to the studio every single day. I'm really trying to bring the studio to you. I'm trying to bring the art to you. So I wish you the best. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you again in another 24 hours. And that leaves me with today's question. So the question of the day: do you like to hold a painter's palette? Let me know in the comments. I'm sure that everybody would like to hear your thoughts and opinions on holding a painter's palette while creating your oil paintings. Thanks again so much for watching, and I'll see you again very soon.